the secret credit card. My name is Elena Ramirez, and I discovered my husband was cheating when I found credit card statements for an account I didn't know existed, hidden in a box at the back of his closet while I was looking for our tax documents in February. Not just one statement. 23 months of statements, carefully organized in chronological order, documenting purchases I'd never seen, and spending patterns that made no sense for the man I thought I knew. The box was cardboard, unmarked, shoved behind his winter coats, and a duffel bag full of camping gear we hadn't used in years. I'd been searching for our 2023 tax folder because our accountant needed it by Friday, and Marcus kept saying he'd find it, but never did. So I'd taken matters into my own hands the way I usually did when things needed to actually get done instead of just talked about. I'd found the tax folder. It was in his filing cabinet in the home office where it should have been, which meant he hadn't actually looked for it at all. But while I was in the closet moving boxes around, I'd knocked over the unmarked one, and statements had spilled across the floor, like evidence at a crime scene. Credit card statements. Visa. In Marcus's name. An account number I didn't recognize. Starting in April 2023, almost 2 years ago, and continuing through this month. The most recent statement showed a balance of $847.63 and a credit limit of $15,000. I sat on the closet floor and started reading through the charges. My hands shaking in that way. Hands shake when your nervous system understands something terrible before your conscious mind catches up. Nordstrom, $236.47. Sephora, $189.23. Anthropologie, $412.88. Free People, $267.34. Lululemon, $198.76. Women's stores, women's purchases, page after page of charges at stores that sold women's clothing, women's shoes, women's accessories, women's makeup. Hundreds of dollars every month for almost 2 years. Nearly $30,000 total based on a quick mental calculation that made my stomach drop. There were other charges too. Restaurants I'd never been to with Marcus. Hotels in cities we'd never visited together. Atlanta, Charlotte, Birmingham, Memphis. Purchases at Target and Walgreens and CVS that happened on days when Marcus said he was working late at the office or traveling for business conferences. My first thought was crystal clear. Marcus is having an affair and buying gifts for his mistress with a secret credit card. My second thought followed immediately. He's been doing it for almost 2 years, and I never noticed. We'd been married for 11 years, together for 14, if you counted the years before the wedding, when we'd lived in the apartment in downtown Nashville and pretended we could afford the rent by eating ramen and splitting entrees at restaurants. We had a house in Hermitage now, a mortgage, 2 rescue dogs, Bonnie and Clyde, named during a phase when we'd been watching too many crime documentaries, a life that looked stable and normal and functional from every angle I'd examined it from. But apparently, Marcus had been living a second financial life for almost 2 years, spending money I didn't know about, shopping at stores for someone who wasn't me, staying in hotels with someone whose existence I'd never suspected. I took photos of every statement with my phone. 23 months of evidence. Dates and amounts and merchant names. A paper trail of betrayal documented in monthly billing cycles and minimum payments and interest charges at 24.99% APR. Then I put the statements back in the box exactly how I'd found them, closed the closet, went downstairs to the kitchen where I made coffee I didn't drink, and tried to figure out what to do with information that felt like it might explode if I held it wrong. Marcus was at work. He worked as an operations manager for a logistics company, spent his days managing supply chains and dealing with shipping delays and attending meetings about efficiency metrics. He'd be home around 6, the same time he came home every Tuesday, unless he had one of his late meetings or business trips or whatever other excuses he'd been using to cover an affair I hadn't seen coming. I called my sister Isabella. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful until she heard my tone. What's wrong? I found credit card statements, a secret account. 23 months of charges at women's clothing stores and hotels. I think Marcus is having an affair. Silence. Then, where are you? Home. Marcus is at work. I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there. Isabella lived 30 minutes away in Franklin. She made it in 22, probably had breaking multiple traffic laws on the way. She burst through my front door with the energy of someone ready for confrontation, still in her dental hygienist scrubs because she'd left work immediately after my call. I showed her the photos on my phone. Let her scroll through 2 years of credit card charges, while her face went from concern to angry to something more complicated. These are all women's stores, she said finally. I know. And he's been doing this for almost 2 years. I know. Have you noticed anything else? Late nights? Unexplained absences? Different behavior? I thought about the last 2 years. Had Marcus been different? Distant? There'd been the usual accumulation of small irritations, dirty dishes left in the sink, forgetting to take out the trash, spending too much time on his phone. But nothing that screamed affair. No unexplained lipstick, or unfamiliar perfume, or suspicious text messages, because I'd never had reason to look for them. He's been traveling more for work, I said. Business conferences, client meetings in other cities. But that's normal for his job. Logistics is regional. He has to visit distribution centers. Except some of these hotel charges are in cities on weekends. Look, Atlanta, Friday and Saturday in July. Birmingham, Saturday and Sunday in September. Those aren't work trips. She was right. I'd been so focused on the women's clothing charges that I hadn't fully processed the hotel pattern, weekend trips to nearby cities, trips he'd never mentioned, trips that should have raised questions if I'd been paying attention instead of trusting blindly. What do I do? I asked. You confront him. Tonight, with the evidence. You show him these statements and you make him explain where this money went and who he's been spending it on. What if he lies? Then you'll know. And then you decide what you want to do about being married to a liar who's been having an affair for 2 years. Marcus came home at 6:14 p.m. I was waiting in the living room with my phone and a printout of the most damning credit card statements. I'd gone to FedEx office and printed them while Isabella waited at the house, wanting hard copies in addition to digital evidence in case Marcus tried to delete or deny anything. Hey, he said, kissing my cheek in that automatic way married people kiss after a decade together. How was your day? Interesting, I said. I found something while looking for tax documents. Want to see? I handed him the printout, watched his face go through the same progression of expressions I'd learned to read over 14 years together. Confusion, recognition, fear, then something unexpected. Relief. You found the statements, he said quietly. I found the statements. Want to explain why you have a secret credit card with $30,000 worth of charges at women's clothing stores over the last 2 years? He sat down heavily on the couch, put his head in his hands. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Because it looks like you're having an affair and buying gifts for your girlfriend with money I didn't know we were spending. I'm not having an affair. I swear. There's no one else. There's never been anyone else. Then explain the charges, the hotels, the clothing, the makeup, all of it. He looked up at me, and his eyes were red like he might cry. The purchases are for my sister, for Lucia. I've been helping her escape her husband. I stared at him. Marcus's sister, Lucia. who I'd met maybe 10 times in 11 years because she lived in Alabama with her husband Derek and their 3 kids and rarely visited Tennessee, who sent Christmas cards every year with family photos that looked perfect, matching outfits, professional photography, everyone smiling like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Escape her husband, I repeated. Derek is abusive, has been for years, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, financially abusive. He controls everything, her money, her phone, her movements. She doesn't have her own bank account, doesn't have access to cash. He monitors her credit cards and questions every purchase. If she tried to buy clothes or makeup or anything for herself, he'd know and he'd want to know why, and it would escalate into violence. How long have you known about this? 2 years. Since April 2023. She called me from a Target bathroom while Derek thought she was grocery shopping, told me she needed help, that she wanted to leave but had no money, no resources, no way to prepare without him finding out. She asked if I could help her build an escape fund without Derek knowing, without you knowing, because he stopped. Because what? Because the fewer people who knew, the safer she'd be. Because abusers have ways of finding out information. Because if Derek suspected she was planning to leave, he'd make sure she couldn't. He'd already threatened her, told her if she ever tried to take the kids, he'd kill her and make it look like an accident. She believed him. I believed him. My anger was transforming into something more complicated. Why didn't you tell me? For the same reason I didn't tell anyone else. To protect Lucia. To protect you. If Derek ever came asking questions, if he ever tried to trace where Lucia was getting money or resources, I needed you to be able to honestly say you didn't know. I needed you to have plausible deniability. So you've been secretly funding your sister's escape plan for 2 years without telling your wife. Yes. Explain the charges, all of them. Make me understand. And he did. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked me through 2 years of secret coordination with his sister, who was trapped in an abusive marriage and planning her escape. The clothing purchases, Nordstrom, Anthropologie, Lululemon, were building a wardrobe for Lucia and her 3 daughters that Derek wouldn't see. Marcus would buy clothes in their sizes and mail them to a P.O. box Lucia had rented under a friend's name. She'd hide them at her mother's house, at her friend's house, anywhere Derek wouldn't find them, building a secret wardrobe so that when she left, she'd have clothes that weren't connected to Derek's credit cards, weren't things he could claim he'd bought and therefore owned. The Sephora purchases were makeup and toiletries. Again, building supplies Derek wouldn't see, wouldn't monitor, wouldn't be able to use to track her down after she left. The hotel charges were safe houses, weekends when Derek traveled for work or went hunting with friends. Marcus would book a hotel room in a nearby city, Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis, and Lucia would bring the kids there. They'd practice leaving, practice packing quickly, practice staying somewhere Derek didn't know about. Rehearsals for the final escape that would need to happen fast and flawlessly when the time came. The Target and Walgreens purchases were burner phones, prepaid debit cards loaded with small amounts of cash, first aid supplies, copies of important documents, building an escape kit piece by piece, without Derek noticing money disappearing or supplies accumulating. Why so expensive? I asked. Why $30,000 over 2 years? Couldn't you have done this cheaper? Some of it is clothes and supplies, but a lot of it is cash. I've been withdrawing cash advances from the credit card. $500 here, $300 there, small enough amounts that they wouldn't trigger scrutiny, and giving it to Lucia. She's been hiding it. building a fund so that when she leaves, she has enough money to get a lawyer, put deposits on an apartment, support herself and 3 kids while she gets on her feet. The goal was $20,000. We're almost there. When is she leaving? March, next month. Derek has a business trip to Chicago, 4 days. While he's gone, Lucia is taking the kids and driving to Nashville. I've already found her an apartment. She signed the lease last week under her maiden name. Found a family lawyer who specializes in domestic violence cases. Set up a new bank account Derek can't access. She's been getting copies of all the important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, medical records, school records, everything she'll need to file for divorce and custody while keeping him away from the kids. I felt like I was hearing about a stranger's life. This wasn't the sister-in-law I'd met at holiday dinners, the woman who smiled in Christmas card photos and seemed to have a perfect suburban life with her husband and kids and house in a good school district. Why didn't I know Derek was abusive? Because abusers don't advertise it. Because Lucia got very good at hiding the bruises and making excuses for Derek's behavior and presenting a perfect face to the world. Because admitting abuse feels like admitting failure, like admitting you made a terrible choice in marrying someone, like opening yourself up to judgment from people who will ask why you stayed so long instead of asking why he hit you in the first place. I could have helped. You're helping now, by understanding, by not making this harder than it already is. What do you need from me? He looked surprised, like he'd expected anger instead of pragmatism. I need you to be okay with the credit card staying active until March, until Lucia is out. After that, I'll close it, pay it off, whatever you want. But until she's safe, I need to keep funding her escape. Okay. Keep the card active. Help your sister. Get her and those kids out of the house and away from the man. And then we'll talk about how you kept this from me for 2 years and how we rebuild trust after secrets this big. Over the next month, I became part of the escape plan instead of just a bystander learning about it after the fact. Marcus introduced me to Lucia over FaceTime. She looked tired, older than I remembered, with a wariness in her eyes that came from years of monitoring every word and movement for signs of danger. I'm sorry, she said, for putting Marcus in this position, for making him keep secrets from you. I didn't know what else to do. Don't apologize, I said. Just get out. Get yourself and your kids out. We'll figure out the rest after you're safe. I helped Marcus prepare the apartment. We furnished it with basics from IKEA and Target. Beds, table, chairs, dishes, towels, everything a family of 4 would need to start over. Stocked the pantry and refrigerator. Made sure there were toys and books for the kids. Created a space that felt safe and welcoming instead of sterile and temporary. We coordinated with the family lawyer. Her name was Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 50s who'd been doing domestic violence cases for 20 years and had seen everything. She'd already filed for an emergency protective order that would be served on Derek the moment Lucia notified her she was out. Had drafted divorce papers citing abuse and seeking sole custody with supervised visitation only. We planned the logistics. Derek's flight to Chicago departed on a Monday morning at 7 a.m. Lucia would take the kids to school like normal, then come back home and pack. She had 2 hours while Derek was in the air and unreachable. Then 4 more hours of driving to Nashville while he landed and went to his conference, unaware his wife and children were gone. Marcus would be her point of contact. Lucia had a burner phone, one of many Marcus had bought with that credit card, that Derek didn't know about. She'd call when she was on the road, call when she made it to Nashville. Call when she was safely in the apartment with the door locked and her kids fed and starting to understand they were never going back to the house where their father had hurt their mother. March 4th was the day. I took off work, told my boss I had a family emergency and needed flexibility. Stayed home with Marcus while we waited for Lucia's call. It came at 9:47 a.m. I'm out, on the road. The kids think we're going to visit Uncle Marcus for a few days. I'll tell them the truth when we get there. Drive safe, Marcus said. We're ready for you. They arrived at 2:33 p.m. Lucia, driving a minivan, packed with whatever she'd been able to fit it in. 2 hours of hurried packing. 3 kids, ages 9, 7, and 4, confused about why they weren't going home, why they'd left in the middle of a school day, why their mother was crying while trying to pretend she wasn't. We helped them unpack, got them settled in the apartment, ordered pizza because cooking felt impossible when everyone was running on adrenaline and fear and relief mixed together. Thank you, Lucia said to me while the kids explored their new rooms, for not hating me, for not hating Marcus for keeping secrets, for helping. You don't have to thank me for basic human decency, I said. Getting you and your kids out of danger isn't something that requires thanks. It's just the right thing to do. Derek called Lucia's phone at 7:16 p.m. She didn't answer. He called 12 more times over the next hour, left voicemails that started concerned and escalated to angry to threatening. Lucia played them for Patricia Morrison, who added them to the evidence file for the protective order. The protective order was served on Derek the next morning at his hotel in Chicago. He called Marcus immediately, screaming threats and accusations. Marcus recorded the call, another piece of evidence. Derek threatened to fine Lucia, to take his kids back, to make everyone involved regret helping his wife leave him. Good luck with that, Marcus said calmly. Lucia has a protective order. You're legally barred from contacting her or coming within 500 feet. The kids are safe. She's filed for divorce and sole custody. And every threat you just made is now recorded and will be used as evidence that you're dangerous and shouldn't have unsupervised access to your children. Have a nice life, Derek. Derek hired a lawyer who tried to argue Lucia had kidnapped the children, that she'd abandoned the marital home, that she was unstable and unfit. But Lucia had evidence, photos of bruises, medical records from ER visits she'd explained away as accidents, text messages where Derek admitted to hitting her, testimony from neighbors who'd heard screaming and violence through walls. The judge granted Lucia full custody, with Derek getting supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other Saturday in a facility with trained monitors present. Derek would never have his children alone again, would never have the opportunity to continue the cycle of abuse he'd started. The divorce was finalized in September. 6 months of legal proceedings that were exhausting and expensive, but necessary. Derek fought everything, tried to claim he was the victim, tried to portray Lucia as a vindictive ex-wife making false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge saw through his performance. Lucia started rebuilding her life, got a job as a medical receptionist, the first job she'd had in 10 years, because Derek had insisted she stay home with the kids. Enrolled the kids in new schools where they started therapy to process the trauma of growing up with domestic violence. Started her own therapy to heal from years of abuse and learn how to exist without fear. Last week, Lucia invited us over for dinner at her apartment, the apartment that's now truly hers, the space where she and her kids are building a life free from violence. The kids seemed lighter, happier. The 9-year-old told jokes at dinner. The 7-year-old showed me a drawing she'd made at school. The 4-year-old sat on Lucia's lap the whole time. secure in the knowledge that his mother was safe and present, and not going to disappear. "Thank you," Lucia said again, "for the credit card, for the planning, for making this possible." "You made it possible," I said. "You were brave enough to leave. We just helped make it easier." That night, driving home, Marcus said, "I'm sorry I kept secrets from you for 2 years. I know that broke your trust. I know it hurt you." "It did hurt," I agreed. "But I understand why you did it. And I probably would have done the same thing in your position. Sometimes protecting people requires secrets. Sometimes love looks like lying because the truth is too dangerous. Can you forgive me?" "I already have, but we need better communication going forward. If something this big comes up again, and I hope it doesn't, but if it does, we handle it together. No more secret credit cards, no more hiding major decisions. Deal. No more secrets." We paid off the credit card, $13,147.63 final balance, which we paid in full from our savings, closed the account, kept the final statement as a reminder of what it had funded. Not an affair, but an escape. Not betrayal, but rescue. I still have that first statement I found, the one from April 2023 that started everything. I keep it in my desk drawer at home as a reminder that sometimes the evidence of infidelity you think you're seeing is actually evidence of something more complicated. That sometimes secret spending is about protecting someone who's vulnerable instead of supporting someone you're sleeping with. That credit card taught me something about marriage and trust and the lies we tell for good reasons versus bad ones. It taught me that Marcus was capable of keeping huge secrets from me for years, which should have felt like betrayal, but instead felt like proof that he'd take serious risks to protect his sister. It taught me that trust can be rebuilt even after secrets, but only if both people are willing to do the work. Lucia and her kids are safe now, building new lives free from violence. And I'm grateful for the secret credit card that made their escape possible, even though discovering it felt like finding evidence of the worst kind of betrayal. Sometimes the credit card statements that make you think your spouse is cheating are actually evidence that they're saving someone's life. Sometimes the worst thing you imagine is nowhere near as complicated or as noble as the truth. That's the story of the secret credit card. Not an affair, but an escape. Not betrayal, but rescue. Not evidence of loving someone else, but evidence of loving family enough to risk everything to save them.